Every leader wants a high performing team, of course. But the reality, most leaders don't know how to build one. Some create a culture of high pressure with little support, and others are so focused on being liked by their team that they shield their team from any challenges. The best leaders, they strike the balance between pushing people forward and setting them up for success. And that's exactly what the Empower Matrix is designed to help you do. Hi, I'm Eric Pfeiffer, and in this episode, I am joined by Don Neldon. We're going to show you how to lead in a way that truly sets your team up for sustainable success.
Yes, we are. And we have worked with enough leaders to know that most leaders fall into one of two categories. And I'm sure for everybody that is joining us today, some of the leaders from your past will spring to mind here. But we have on one end leaders that just have so much challenge, and it just feels like you can never do enough. We have all been in that space where the bar, anytime you reach the bar is moved, right? And it's not necessarily coming from a bad place. They are constantly wanting to get the most out of people, and they feel like the way to do that is to just keep pushing, keep challenging. So that's one mistake that we find, one error that leaders fall into. The other side of that pendulum, though, is that we have leaders that are so worried about being liked that they are just supporting the heck out of their team, which sounds lovely. But in reality, what it does is it produces complacent team members that feel like it doesn't like there's nothing I'm reaching for. There's nothing that we're striving for as a team. So I might as well just do the bare minimum and we'll get through it. And it creates a sense of complacency. The bigger issue, though, is most leaders don't even realize that they have a default, that they're doing one of these things over the other. And they don't realize like what environment that's creating for their team.
I couldn't agree more. When I think of these two, what I like to call leadership energies that we bring into any environment, I like to think of them like the gas and brake pedal of your car. Like we all understand that without one of those, it doesn't work. If it's all gas, then we're inevitably just going to run into stuff. And if it's all brakes, we're not going to get anywhere. And so as we
That's a
talk,
good analogy.
yeah, as we talk about the Empower Matrix, and as we talk about, what does it mean for us to calibrate as leaders, high support or high challenge? They're both equally valuable. They're both equally important in terms of how we're engaging the people in our environments. And it's when we find the appropriate calibration, just like learning to drive, we can learn how to appropriately calibrate these energies so that we are actually getting the best out of our teams.
Absolutely. And I think that is the magic of this tool, is helping leaders to understand their default and then how that is actually causing their team to respond and react in the workplace. So, Eric, would you just lay out the Empower Matrix for us? Teach us how this tool works.
Yeah, so as we jump into this tool, which by the way is available, in a link in our show notes so that you can see the visual image if when you have a moment, it's very helpful. I think I would encourage our listener as we're unpacking this tool to be thinking about all of the different dynamic leaders that they've experienced in life, from growing up in a particular household where mom and dad or whoever was in charge, they were calibrating support and challenge. And how did they do that? And so I want us to reflect on our upbringing, our experience at home. I want us to think about our experience with different teachers in our younger years or professors through our college years. I want us to think about the different bosses that we've had. I want us to think about the different coaches. Maybe we played sports or we were involved, maybe even in music instruction. Because what's important to understand is that in every engagement between human beings, we are calibrating support and challenge. As a matter of fact, when I go in to order a Starbucks at a local Starbucks, my engagement with that person taking my order, I'm calibrating support and challenge.
Absolutely.
If I'm making eye contact, if I'm smiling, if I'm kind, if they at a grocery store, if they're asking me, hey, did you find everything that you were looking for? That's an expression of support. I'm here to help you. How can I partner you to help you succeed? But there's also a bit of challenge, right? So the challenge from the grocery store clerk is, hey, I'm going to need some money because if you want to exchange goods for, for something, it's going to be some money. And the challenge is you've got to pay for it. You've got to pay the full amount. No different than if I'm in a restaurant and the person waiting on us is really dropping the ball and unfocused and not attending to our needs. I might challenge them by leaving a smaller tip than I normally would. So it's
Okay.
just really good to understand what this looks like in our everyday life experience. But of course, we're going to ultimately frame this through the lens of what does it mean for us as leaders to calibrate our leadership energies to get the best out of our team, to empower our team members most effectively. And that's why it's called the MPWR Matrix. And so, what I want our listener, whether you're on a walk or you're driving in your car, as you're listening, is I want you to imagine in your mind a simple matrix, a vertical axis and a horizontal axis. And on the vertical axis, we're going to talk about support, this leadership energy of support. And support can be understood in a variety of ways. It can be understood through encouragement, resourcing our team members with, it could be technology, it could be with different help that they need. It could be support could look like encouraging people to go home when they're sick, giving them a day off, because their family's in town. Support could look like, helping them out on a particular project, lending your expertise. Right. So these are all just different expressions of support. And on this vertical axis, as we go up on the axis, we have high support. And on the bottom of that axis, we would refer to that as low support.
Yeah.
On the horizontal axis, we have challenge. And we're not talking about, I think sometimes when we think of challenge, we think of it from a negative perspective,
I
right?
do.
That somebody's
Mhm.
policing us, somebody's harming us, somebody's abusing us. No, we're talking about a positive challenge. In other words, when a leader sets really clear expectations, when a leader is willing to
Yep.
hold their team members accountable, to partner with them, to say, hey, I believe you can do something better. I believe you can deliver at a higher level. Challenge is setting the bar and calling out the best in those other people. That's positive challenge. And we
Yeah.
all know that we don't grow without a proper degree of challenge. Our coaches challenged us to get more fit or to develop our skills for that particular sport. Our teachers challenged us to learn a kind of mathematics that we didn't know previously. Our professors challenged us to rewrite an essay because they believed we could do a better job. Our bosses challenge us because why? We need challenge if we're going to move outside of our comfort zone and have an opportunity to grow or develop. So oftentimes I like to think of this analogy of like when people decide, hey, I want to get more fit. So they go to a gym and they hire a trainer. So imagine the
Mhm.
trainer that shows up and says, hey, great to meet you. I'm your trainer. I want to get to know all about you. Let's go to the smoothie bar. I want to hear all about it, your life and your fitness
Yeah.
history and about your family and your upbringing. Like, wow, this person really cares about me, wants to know me, is very supportive in that experience.
Mhm.
But if every time you show up to the gym, the trainer does the same thing, they just want to go to the smoothie bar, hear about your week, and empathize with your
Yeah.
challenges.
Oh,
That
yeah.
feels good, and that's a great kind of energy. But at some point, you're going to start to wonder, what am I paying this person for? They're not actually challenging me to do anything about my
I'm
fitness.
not getting any stronger.
I'm not moving the needle. Now imagine the opposite, a trainer that when you show up, they don't want to know anything about your history. They don't care about your lifestyle. They don't care about your schedule. They just want to get right into some really intense workout routines that has you feeling sore for the next 3 days. Then you show back up and immediately they just jump right back into the craziest workouts that you could imagine, never wanting to know about, have you ever had injuries? What are the
Okay.
areas that you really want to focus on? What are your fitness goals? That we have examples of a
Mhm.
fitness trainer, one that's all support, no challenge, which may feel good in the moment, but it's not going to lead to any growth. Or you have the trainer that's all challenge and no support. And that trainer is probably going to cause injury. And I think even now, as our listeners are reflecting on this analogy, we can probably think back to our parents and how they calibrated support and challenge, and how
Oh,
did
yeah.
that leave us feeling, or what was our experience with the various
Mm.
teachers, mentors, coaches, and bosses. Now, because we have these two axes that crisscross, we get 4 quadrants. And imagine in that top right quadrant where there's high support and high challenge, we call this the empowered quadrant because it represents a kind of culture where people are experiencing the appropriate amount of high expectations, responsibility, accountability, but they're also receiving the necessary support, encouragement, resourcing to give that person the best possible chance to grow, to develop, and to become a better version of themselves. And this is an incredible experience. And most of our listeners could probably think back to say, gosh, I remember this one leader in my life that was probably my favorite leader, the one that impacted me the most, the one that made me want to get better. And we'll probably can think back and say, gosh, they probably calibrated these two energies of support and challenge really well, right? They were never overdoing one or the other. They were well balanced or integrated. And those are wonderful experiences. I can think back on a time when I've experienced that from various leaders in my life. And that's usually when I experience the greatest amount of personal transformation and growth. But the reality is, we talked about this earlier. You mentioned that a lot of leaders, we tend to default to one of those energies more than the other for a variety of reasons, personality type, life experiences, fears, insecurities, whatever may be driving us. And so we tend to calibrate one more than the other, which then starts to create these other 3 quadrants. And I almost like to think of it like a map. Like you can plot any area of your life on this map to say, am I feeling empowered in this season in whatever area I'm thinking about? Or am I experiencing one of these other 3 quadrants? So really quick, let me just unpack those other 3 quadrants.
Yeah.
So in the top left quadrant, you would have, according to our visual, you have a culture or environment that is highly supportive, but very little challenge. And you mentioned this earlier, right? This is going to create an environment where people feel cared for, encouraged, supported, but very little way by expectation, responsibility, accountability. And so people oftentimes, when I say, hey, give me words that might describe this environment, people have shared with me, oh, that sounds like it's a cozy culture, or it's a comfortable culture, or maybe it leads to a sense of entitlement, right? Everything's going to be done for me. I don't have to lift a finger. Other people, it becomes a complacent environment where people are no longer growing because they just feel really comfortable and it's easier to just stay status quo. And we don't want to be in that quadrant, but at the same time, we have to recognize that we may discover that parts of our life are in that quadrant. I know for me and for many people out there, at least once or twice a year, I realize or come to recognize my fitness journey has fallen into the complacent quadrant. I'm not working out like I should, I'm letting myself off the hook. I'm being too easy on myself. And so that's when I realized, okay, something's not right and it's got to change. And we'll come back to that in a moment. Now let's imagine the opposite, the lower right quadrant, where you have a high degree of challenge, but very low support. And in this quadrant, when I ask, clients in the past to describe this environment with words, they would say it's stressed, it's overwhelming, it feels burdensome, it feels like you're on the treadmill of approval, like you're never quite doing enough, which you said earlier. People become very discouraged. And oftentimes this is the quadrant where people experience burnout.
Oh, yeah.
Just feel like we're going. We're never quite doing enough. And we feel ill supported, ill cared for in that process. And so that would be the opposite of the quadrant we just described. So now we have the 2 kind of opposite ends of the spectrum. We have the high support, low challenge, complacency, or we have high challenge and low support, which is stressed, burned out, and discouraged. And then we have this. Oh, go ahead, Don. Yeah.
I was just going to say 2 kind of leadership pitfalls that we see often in both of those 2 is in the high support, low challenge, we see leaders that are rescuing their people. So they're running interference, keeping their team members from experiencing the consequences of their decisions, good, bad, or otherwise. And then on the other side, we see leaders who are throwing their team members under the bus or pushing that responsibility when it was actually the responsibility should have been on the leader. And so those are kind of two behaviors that we see that typify those opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to support and challenge.
Yeah, those are great examples. And I'm sure our listeners can almost immediately imagine how this might look in the terms of the parenting culture that they grew up in, or as adults, if we have children and we are parenting, this is going to begin to give us some insight into how we're handling our children and whether we're creating an empowering environment for our children or not. The fourth quadrant, lower left quadrant, low support, low challenge.
Yeah.
This is an environment that when I ask clients, describe this experience of this kind of an environment, they say it feels apathetic, dead, boring, unmotivated, and mainly because it's an environment where we feel left alone, where we feel we've been
Yeah.
abandoned. We feel like nobody cares whether we're winning or not, or whether we're doing anything or not. And I would suggest this, that I believe that so much of the the criticism that I've heard from leaders and organizations about remote work has to do with the fact that as human beings, we require an experience of high support and high challenge for us to feel empowered and to actually move the needle in any area of our work.
Yeah.
And so here's what I challenge though these leaders and organizations. I say, yes, you're probably experiencing that a lot of your remote workers are not showing up well. They're not showing up to meetings. They're not accomplishing tasks. They feel unaccountable and on and on and on. And I say, I agree. And that's probably because they're not experiencing the levels of support and challenge that they need to operate more effectively. However, I am a believer that you can provide high support and high challenge even for remote working contexts.
Mhm.
We can do that through regular Zoom calls, check-ins, review sessions, some of which we've already talked about in our previous podcasts. But it is possible. But as leaders, if we're not aware of the type of
Yeah.
energy that our team members need, whether they're in person or remote, um, then at some point we've got to ask the hard question: is it the fault of our remote employees, or is it the fault of us as leaders that we're not providing these energies? So let me pause here. I have a couple more things that I want to share for our listeners, but I'd love to hear, Don, for you. Obviously, we've taught this tool so many times. We've seen the impact in the environments in which we introduce. I'd love to hear what you're connecting with.
Yeah. Well, for starters, I think you are spot on when it comes to that idea of remote work. And what it requires is an extra level of intentionality from leaders,
Yeah.
because often two things are at play there: out of sight, out of mind. So leaders are just going about their daily business and they're not physically running into those employees. And so they're missing those connection points without that intentionality. And two, our own negativity bias. If we don't know what somebody's doing, we assume that they're not doing it or they're doing it poorly. And so those two things combined can really create a difficult position for a remote worker. And that's why it requires the intentionality of the leader to overcome that. But I also want to add that in that lower left quadrant with low support and low challenge, this is where we see the um, new phrase that has been springing into the world, which is quiet quitting,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
It's where people can just exist doing the bare minimum, flying under the radar, and nobody really knows. It's like the guy from Office Space, right? That they moved him around from different office to different office.
To the basement. Oh, look at
Yeah, because nobody even knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
Um, so quiet quitting is a definite threat in this lower left quadrant that leaders need to be aware of. It's just one more reason. Like each of the quadrants have their own threat. And it's why it's so important to understand how we're calibrating support and challenge as leaders.
I love that. And in a few minutes, we'll get to some practical applications, some reflective
Yeah.
questions that we want to encourage our listeners to engage, right? Because I think what we're both pointing at is that we as leaders bear the primary responsibility for recognizing the kind of environment or culture that we are creating. And I would go so far as to say, I think most leaders are generally unaware of the
Agreed.
prevailing environment that they're creating with their teams, right? I mean, the number of leaders that, when you ask their team, which of these four quadrants most reflects your experience in this, in this job space, and then you ask the leader separately, what would you say you're creating? Very often leaders will say, well, I think I'm creating an empowered environment. I think I'm providing a really healthy balance of support and challenge. And then you talk to a number of their team members who in confidence will say, actually, man, the prevailing experience I'm having is, the lower right quadrant, high challenge, low support. I feel stressed. I feel burdened. I feel like I'm never quite cutting it. Or I feel they will say the opposite. Gosh, I feel like my leader never checks in. I feel like my leader doesn't care. I feel like they just expect that I'm going to figure it all out. And they feel kind of in this complacent environment. Here's the thing I just want to say. This is a really powerful insight. Is the natural tendency for human beings, even in the workplace, right, where we're getting paid and we have responsibility and hopefully some accountability, the natural human default without intentional support and challenge
Yeah.
is for people to actually devolve back into that lower left quadrant where they feel bored, apathetic, disinterested, unmotivated. And leaders wonder, why are people moving all the time to new jobs? Why is there so much turnover? Why can't we keep it? Why aren't they loyal? Now, I know there's some generational dynamics that's another point need to be addressed. But I oftentimes just say to leaders like, hey, have you really reflected on the kind of environment you've created and whether this is an environment that is exciting, motivating, inspiring, and empowering for the people on your team? Because if it's not, that's a simple fix for us as leaders that we can engage with. Like you said earlier, this intentional investment that would go a long way. Because I know there's generational differences, but human beings are human beings. We haven't evolved all that much over the last 150 years, right? And so it's really important that we as leaders kind of own first and foremost that responsibility to ask the hard question, what kind of environment are we creating here?
Absolutely. And there's so much brain dynamics we could get into about why that happens. But I think the easiest way to think about it is the law of entropy, right? That things left to their own devices don't naturally get better. We don't naturally get more fit. We don't our house doesn't naturally become more clean, right? We
Yes.
know that to be true because of our lived experience. And yet, as leaders, sometimes we think leaving our employees to their own devices, they are naturally going to grow and develop. And it's like, it's not going to happen.
That's right.
Um,
That's right.
so I would love to hear your real world example. Where have you seen this play out recently with actual clients?
Well, first of all, I see this play out in virtually every conversation having with,
Yes. Yes.
our clients, because this is one of the greatest challenges for leaders, right? Is, we have this expectation that because our team members are educated or experienced or skilled, that they're just, they're getting paid, right? I've heard so many leaders, but I'm paying them. Like, why aren't they motivated enough by that? And I have to remind people all the time, like, money is not a good long-term motivator. It's maintenance. People need to get paid enough
Mhm.
to feel like they can be in a job, but that's not what's going to motivate them.
Oh, true.
Creating an environment for them as human beings where they feel seen, heard, and valued, where they feel like they have an opportunity to become a better version of themselves. And that requires we as leaders take seriously how we're calibrating support and challenge. Let me just say this. The best leaders calibrate challenge and support in intentional ways to keep their teams engaged, accountable, and growing. So if we have
Mhm.
concerns as leaders that any individuals or our team as a whole are not engaged, accountable, and growing, it is likely that we are not calibrating support and challenge effectively. And again, it's
Yep.
a simple fix. It's not rocket science, but it does take a level of intentionality. Now, I'll give you one example of a recent conversation with a leader, and I'm gonna share this example because this leader found themselves actually doing the same thing on opposite sides with two different team members. So
Oh,
this
interesting.
leader runs a I would say a relatively, successful tech company. And they had two different team members, one who had been underperforming for probably 2 or 3 years. But that team member had been with the organization since its inception. The leader felt a kind of responsibility and loyalty in a sense like, man, you've been with us from the beginning. So you know, I, I don't want to just get rid of you. I want to honor the time you've been with us. And yet, as I was talking to the guy, I said, hey, but have you brought to this individual's attention the areas where you feel like they're not performing up to par? Have you brought the necessary challenge, not because you're wanting to be mean or harsh or beat them down, but because you're
Yes.
wanting as a leader to call the best out of that individual? And the only way to do that is to challenge them and to say, hey, I want to bring to your attention that these are expectations. You're not meeting them. So what do we do together? How can I now support you as you try to move the needle in this particular area? The leader kept saying, gosh, I don't want to do that. Well, what the leader discovered was that they have a really hard time calibrating challenge, in part because they are afraid for their team not to like them as a leader. Part of it is because they're all similar ages. And so there was a concern around not wanting their team to feel like, they think they're high and mighty. And I had to like really help them understand, hey, like caring about your team requires both support and challenge. Caring for others in our lives is not one or the other. That's not caring. Actual caring or loving or partnering well with the people in our lives requires both support and challenge. It's not loving to me if my wife never calls me, up to a better standard of how I'm operating. It's not loving to you as a member of my team if I don't ever challenge you and push you to be a better version, but while I'm providing support for the journey. Now, interestingly enough, on the flip side, the same leader had another team member for whom they were just constantly harsh with them, constantly, criticizing them. And in a lot of their team meetings, this leader was not just critiquing, but, a lot of challenge in terms of, hey, I don't think you're doing this well. I don't think you're doing this right. I think you need to get better. And I said, help me understand, like you're terrified to challenge this other individual and that's not helping them. But over here, you're more than ready to bring so much challenge that this person looks visibly discouraged, beat up, like they're on the treadmill of performance. And it's so interesting because I remind people, I think we all have as leaders a natural proclivity to favor one of these energies over the others. Contextually speaking, different dynamics, relationships, whether it's at home versus work or with an employee versus a client, we tend to kind of pick and choose what we think favors us in that moment. And so when they came to realize, this leader we were working with, that with one team member, it was all support, no challenge. The other team members all challenge, no support. The reality is both of those team members were underperforming. And I had to help this leader recognize, hey, at some point, are you willing to take responsibility for the fact that you may not be engaging them well? Maybe you're not creating an environment for those two team members that is going to call out the best of them and help them grow. And here's what's amazing. In both instances, it took probably about 2 months. This leader began to really work at being more intentional about calibrating the gas and brake pedal more effectively with each team member. And guess what happened? Well, first of all, for our listeners, no, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, and it's a beautiful ending to the story. And they discovered that one of those team members actually, in fact, wasn't a good fit any longer for the organization. And for the other team member, once he added a little bit of support, that team member began to flourish and blossom like a flower in sunshine. It was really amazing.
That I love that. I love that example because you can see from two sides how one leader was missing the mark with two different team members. And we absolutely have some concrete tips that we want to leave our listeners with. But before we get there, I just want to add in this piece because I want to make sure our listeners don't miss it. Challenge is not mean. For some of us, we have that feeling that if we're challenging people, it's mean. But I loved how you were saying, like, it's not the loving thing to do. My son recently was not turning in his homework in several classes, and I had to bring that challenge to him. It's not loving it's not loving for me to just let him fail. That's not the loving thing to do. So sometimes challenge is actually the loving thing. And on the flip side, you touched on this and I just want to drive it home. Um, Support is not the salary. Paying your employees is not support. That's not support. Also, like giving them a little pat on the head, that's not support. Sometimes support looks like making sure they have the tools they need to accomplish the task that you've given them. Do they need a training? Do they need, like you said earlier, do they need technology? There can be support isn't just this fluffy, nebulous thing. Support can be actual, tangible things that a person
Yeah.
needs to accomplish the task that you're giving them.
Yeah. Checking in, listening well,
Yeah.
giving them an opportunity to vent if they're frustrated with something. Yeah. I love what you're saying because I think for all of us, we want to check ourselves. Do we see challenge as something that's negative? And if so, we need to reframe challenge as actually a very important part of how we care for other people and how we lead them. Yeah. Because without challenge, we don't grow. And other people who see support as, like you said, kind of the whole navel gazing, thumb sucking, mamby pamby, whatever, people say that like it's just soft. And it's like, no, actually, we as human beings, we need an appropriate amount of support and partnership to help us navigate the challenges that
Right.
are ahead of us. Yeah.
Okay, so we always want to take these concepts to very practical application because we believe that if a piece of advice doesn't actually move the needle for a client, then it's not doing anything.
That's right.
So I would love if you can give our listeners a couple of actionable, simple steps that they can do that are going to help them navigate this support and challenge matrix.
Yeah, I love that. I'm gonna actually offer some practical things and then kind of offer illustrations from my own life because it's really important
Great.
for our listeners to know that this is the stuff that we practice, right? These are the
Yep.
mental models that we ourselves operate with every single day because we know that the more we align our life with these mental models, the better our lives are going to be and the stronger leaders we're going to be. First of all, it's helpful just to step back and remember that this matrix creates a kind of map where we can take any area of our life, whether it's our physical health or fitness, whether it's our marriage, or you can even get really specific. How about communication in our marriage? How about
Mhm.
sex life? How about parenting? How about our
Mhm.
finances? You can take any area of our life, macro or micro, and we can just simply begin to plot those areas on the map. What is the prevailing experience for me in this area of my life? Is it in the empowered quadrant? Or is it in the cozy or complacent quadrant? Is it in the discouraged and stressed quadrant? Or is it in the apathetic or bored quadrant? And once I begin to plot any area of my life on the map, that's the starting point. That's what we're talking about. The importance of self-awareness and self-leadership is being willing to recognize where we are experiencing these areas of our life. Then we can ask the simple question: if I wanted to move this area either deeper up into the empowered quadrant or from one of the other three less ideal quadrants into the empowered quadrant, what energy needs to shift? In other words, what
Yes.
do I need to add? Do I need more support or do I need more challenge? So let me give us a couple illustrations. Number one,
Yeah.
as most people every year, at least 2 to 3 times a year, I have this kind of moment of like, oh my gosh, I'm not paying as much attention as I should to my fitness and health. And so I'm in the complacent quadrant, or the opposite. I incur an injury while doing something that I don't think I should have been injured for. Now I'm discouraged and stressed because I'm physically unable to do what I want to do.
I'm
Oh,
old.
wait, what you say?
I'm old.
I'm a whole. Either way, it gives me an opportunity to say, okay, do I need more support? Do I need medical care? Do I need to go to a chiropractor? Those are ways we get support,
Mhm.
right? Do I need to research and look up some ways of eating and taking care of my body or sleep rhythms that would be more effective? These are all forms of support that I'm looking for. Or if I'm in the complacent quadrant, I need more challenge. I might need to hire a personal trainer for a season. I might need to re-up at my gym. I might need to tell my wife, hey, I want to be accountable. I'm committed to going to the gym 3 days a week and working out in a particular way. So again, we can see no matter what quadrant we're in, we just need to then ask the question to get from where I'm at currently up into the upper right quadrant, which energy or energies need to be calibrated differently so that I can move the needle in that particular area of my life. The same goes for as we're leading those people in our teams, or even from a parenting perspective, identifying where are people experiencing a particular area of their life or workplace, life. And are they in whatever quadrant they're in? And then as a leader, what can I do to provide the necessary support or challenge to help them have a chance to move into that upper right quadrant or into an empowered experience? So a couple of other illustrations. When years ago, our previous dog, Winston, God rest his soul, uh, he earlier this year, just an amazing family pet. But when we first got him, I did not want a dog. I did not want a pet. And I was all challenged with that dog. I mean, if he made a mistake as a puppy and pee on the floor, man, I'd smack his butt and throw him outside. And if he wanted to, sit on my lap, I wouldn't have it. And I didn't give him any love, right? It's all challenge, no support, to the point where one day I walk into the kitchen when I get home from work and the dog just literally, as I get close to the dog just pees on the ground. I'm like, what the heck is going on? Isn't this dog? My wife pulls me aside, right? The voice of wisdom and reason in my life. And she said, hey, babe, so you need to take a cue from your own leadership toolkit. You are all challenge and no support with this dog. This dog is stressed and overwhelmed and terrified of you. And I was like, well, that's not my fault. Dog's bad, man's best friend. Yeah, right. Well, once I got over myself, I realized you're right. I'm creating an environment that is stressing this dog out to no end. And so it took weeks and maybe even a couple of months. But as I was more intentional to invest support into my experience with this dog, little by little, the dog began to trust me. Little by little, we developed a kind of trusting relationship. And we ended up having an incredible dynamic with this house pet. And people go, it's just a dog. But it just goes to prove the point. Our engagement with any other living entity really is always a calibration of support and challenge. Another great example, my wife and I, a couple of years ago, man, we had a rough patch, like welcome to marriage, right? We've been through, I think, rough patches, really big rough patches in our marriage, but that's how we evolve, right? And so we found ourselves, when we were reflecting together, we both felt like our marriage on the whole is in that lower right, stressed, overwhelmed, burned out quadrant. And so, we decided, thankfully, to seek out some marriage counseling. We found an incredible marriage counselor because we needed support. We needed somebody to support us on our journey of learning to communicate more effectively and to resolve, kind of these long time unresolved tensions. I remember our counselor saying, man, your guys' marriage is like a minefield. Like you have all these landmines, things that you can't even talk about without things blowing up. And I want to support you and partner you and equip you, right? All expressions. Then, of course, he brought some challenged some of our preconceived ideas and our kind of negative views of each other, but really supported us to develop the skills to be able to communicate more effectively, which led to some radical breakthroughs in our relationship and really kind of launched us into a whole new season of joy in our marriage. So again, these are just examples. So real quick, let me just encourage our listener right now, things you can do right here, right today. Number one, ask yourself this question. Do I naturally lean toward support or challenge? Which one do I calibrate more comfortably? And if you want to grow in the one you're uncomfortable with, find somebody in your life who's actually good at calibrating that energy and watch them. Pay attention to their tone of voice, their body language. How do they communicate support or challenge? I'm naturally challenging. So I had to spend years watching people that were much better at calibrating support and really picking up on all of the ways that they would do it, which was very natural for them, but unnatural for me. And guess what? Nowadays, I am far better at calibrating both in a way that's helpful to the people around me. The second thing I'd recommend to our listeners is to simply reflect for themselves. What is their workplace experience like? How would they do? Which quadrant would best describe their current experience, right? Even if you're the owner operator or CEO of an organization, you're the top of the pile. Like, you can still reflect on, what is my experience? Which quadrant do I feel like I'm primarily in my workplace? And what might need to change if I'm not already in the empowered culture? We can also, third thing I'd recommend is to just take a few minutes, sit down, maybe even journal. We talked a lot about journaling, and just write the team members' names of the people that directly report to you, and ask the simple question: if I had to, which quadrant do I think would best describe what I think their experience might be, and what needs to change in the intentionality of my leadership to help that person maybe move into the empowered quadrant. And of course, if we want to be really, really, really daring as leaders, which I applaud anybody who would do this, to sit down, share this diagram with people on your team and ask them, hey, this is a safe place. Could you please share with me which quadrant feels most reflective of your experience under my leadership, so that I have some ideas of how I can become a better leader for you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I love those really practical steps that people can take. Depending on your boldness, listener, you can choose which of those you decide to lean into this week. But as we wrap up our episode this week, we want to remind you all of the tools, the images will be in the show notes, so you can navigate down there to find them. While you're there, go ahead and hit subscribe so that you make sure that you don't miss any of these conversations. The first several episodes of our podcast are just literally laying out the tool that we teach our client for free to you. So take advantage of that. Go back and listen to all of them. And lastly, we have a free gift for you down there, a mini course that we have developed called Five Shifts to Become the Leader You Wish You Had. So you can sign up for that down in the show notes as well. We hope that this conversation has been encouraging, and that there are some pieces that you can take away to implement to become the best version of yourself as you lead others this week.
Can I add one little thing, Don? I would
Please.
love to really encourage our listeners. There might be something they hear in the episode today or in a previous episode that they think, gosh, I just wish I had somebody to process this with. Like, it's something we're saying in the sessions is triggering some really important, critical areas of their life experience. We just want to encourage you, go to our website. You can sign up for a free coaching call, no strings attached. We just really want to help people like yourselves out there, who are in the daily grind of trying to figure out how to become a better leader. If we can help you and encourage you in a free coaching call, we'd love to be able to do that. And it's going to be one of us probably on the call. Right.
It will be. All right. Thank you, listeners. We will be back next week with another tool for you.